All right, so you're back for more, huh? I get it, you love to learn new things, but man, sometimes it feels like there just aren't enough hours in the day to really get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I feel that. Information overload is a real thing.
Right. And that's where we come in. Here on the deep dive, we're all about taking complex, often really puzzling topics and giving you the crucial details you need. No fluff, just the good stuff.
Exactly. We do the digging so you don't have to.
That's the idea. So today, strap in, folks, because we're diving into a mystery that has haunted investigators and, frankly, an entire community for over 3 decades. We're talking about the disappearance of Sherrill Levitt, her daughter, Suzie Streeter, and Suzanne's close friend, Stacy McCall. This all went down in Springfield, Missouri, way back on June 7th, 1992.
A case that, even after 31 years, still feels so incredibly raw for so many people involved.
31 years, man. It's hard to even wrap your head around that. And to this day, despite countless hours poured into this investigation, the truth remains elusive.
It really does. It's a case that just grabs you and refuses to let go.
Yeah.
And for this deep dive, you've been kind enough to share a whole stack of material with us.
We've got news articles, a super in-depth Wikipedia entry, and even a piece you found online that, well, let's just say, offers some alternative takes on the whole thing.
A real mix of perspectives, which is always interesting. But our goal here, like always, is to synthesize all of it for our listeners.
We're going to pull out the most significant pieces, the things that really matter, and try to, I don't know, maybe shed some light on the lingering questions around this truly, and don't use this word lightly, baffling event.
Agreed. Baffling is the word. So, where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think the natural place to start is with the night before it all went down, June 6th, 1992. A big day, right? Graduation day for Suzie Streeter and Stacy McCall. They were finishing up at Kickapoo High School.
Yep, and like a lot of high school grads, they were hitting the party circuit, celebrating with friends. It was a night of, excitement and anticipation for what the future holds, all that.
The whole bit. I remember those days. So what was the plan? Where were they supposed to end up that night?
Well, initially, they were thinking they'd crash at their friend Janelle Kirby's house after the parties wound down. Makes sense, right? Graduation parties, probably a lot of people coming and going.
Yeah, totally.
But as the night went on, it became clear that Janelle's house was going to be pretty packed, with family in town for her graduation and all.
So kind of a last-minute audible, right?
Right. So they decided to head over to Sherrill Levitt's house instead. Sherrill, Suzanne's mom. The address was 1717 East Delmar Street.
Okay, so we've got them at the parties, and then they decide to head over to Sherrill's. Do we know for sure that's where they ended up?
Well, here's the thing. We had to piece together the timeline from different bits of information, right? So we know that Sherrill spoke to a friend on the phone that night around 11:15 p.m.
And what was she talking about? Anything unusual?
Not really, it seems. Pretty mundane stuff, actually. They were chatting about Cheryl's plans to paint an armoire in her bedroom.
An armoire, okay.
Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary there. As for Suzanne and Stacy, they were last seen leaving that last graduation party around 2:15 a.m. So that puts them leaving sometime in the very early hours of June 7th.
Okay, so 2:15 a.m., they're out the door. But do we know they actually made it to Cheryl's house?
This is where things start to get interesting and honestly really troubling. See, the next morning, their cars, both of them, were still parked outside the house on Delmar Street.
Oh, so that's a point in favor of them making it back there.
It is, and it's not just the cars. Inside the house, their purses were there, their jewelry, their clothing, everything.
That's a bit strange. If someone had taken them against their will, wouldn't they have taken their stuff?
You'd think so, right? That's what makes it so puzzling. And if we try to picture what might have happened inside the house before they disappeared, based on what was found later, well, it's not what you expect.
What do you mean?
In the bathroom, investigators found damp makeup cloths, the kind used to take your makeup off, and their jewelry was right there too.
So they were getting ready for bed just like normal.
Exactly. A normal night, winding down. Even more telling, in one of the bedrooms, Stacy's shorts were found, folded neatly on top of her shoes.
Okay, that's really specific. Why would that be so important?
Well, think about it. Why would you fold your clothes and place them so carefully if you weren't planning on staying there? It really points to her settling in for the night, expecting to be there for a while.
You're right. That's a good point.
And there's more. Cheryl's bed looked like it had been slept in. So everything points to them being there at the house in the early morning hours, and then nothing.
Poof. Gone.
basically.
Okay, so they're at the house getting ready for bed. Everything seems normal. Then what? When does it become clear that something's seriously wrong?
Well, the next morning, June 7th, their friend Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend Mike Henson, they decided to head over to Sherrill's house around 9 a.m.
Why was that?
Well, the three of them, Suzanne, Stacy, and Janelle, they had made plans to go to a water park over in Branson that day. So it makes sense that Janelle would want to, go get them.
Yeah, of course. So what happened when they got to the house?
Right off the bat, things were off. The front door, it was unlocked.
Unlocked. That's not a good sign.
Not really. They went inside, and as we know, the women were nowhere to be found. But here's the thing. Remember how we talked about their cars and belongings? Still there. Cars in the driveway, everything inside untouched.
Oh, that's just weird, right? It doesn't add up.
It's one of those things that sends a chill down your spine. The people are gone, but their stuff is all there. And there was something else, a really strange detail.
What was that?
The porch light. The glass globe. It was shattered, broken into pieces. But here's the catch. The bulb inside was still intact, still working.
Oh, that's just odd. You'd think if someone was breaking in, they'd smash the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it's not the kind of damage you typically expect. It's almost like, I don't know, a warning or something. And here's something that's frustrating in hindsight. Mike Henson, Janelle's boyfriend, well, he swept up the broken glass on the porch. He said he was worried about Janelle. She was barefoot.
Yeah, I get that. Wanting to protect her.
Right. Totally understandable in the moment. But looking back, who knows what kind of evidence might have been in that broken glass? Footprints, anything. It's possible that crucial information was lost right there.
Ugh, that's a tough one. I mean, who would have thought at the time?
Nobody could have known. And to make things even more confusing, Janelle started getting these strange phone calls.
Oh, like prank calls.
Kind of, but creepier. She said they were strange and disturbing with, like, sexual innuendos.
Yeah.
And the voice, she described it as teenish, like a young guy.
Heck, that's scary.
It is. And there's a bit of a wrinkle here. Suzanne had apparently mentioned getting prank calls at the house before.
Oh, so it wasn't totally out of the blue.
Right. So at the time, it was just one more weird thing in a pile of weird things. No one could say for sure if it was connected to the disappearances.
So, at this point, Janelle and her boyfriend are at the house. They've found the door unlocked, no sign of the women, strange phone calls. What happens next? Who figures out that this isn't just a case of them sleeping in or something?
Well, later that day, Stacy McCall's mom, Janice, shows up at the house. She hadn't been able to reach Stacy all day, and understandably, her worry was through the roof.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
And what she found when she got there, well, it just made everything 10 times worse.
What'd she find?
All three of their purses were in Suzanne's bedroom, just sitting there. And Sherrill's purse, it had over $800 in cash inside, money from her job.
Wow, $800. That's not nothing.
Nope, and it really makes you think, right? If someone was kidnapping 3 people, why would they leave behind that much cash? It's not like they were hurting for money.
It's like robbery wasn't the main goal here, Something else was going on.
That's the feeling you get. And there were these other little details that just added to the mystery. Sherrill and Suzanne, they both smoked, right? But their cigarettes, they were just sitting there untouched. And this is where it gets really strange. Sherrill, she was a chain smoker. Like, all the time.
Yeah.
So the fact that her cigarettes were just sitting there, that was a huge red flag. And there was this half-empty can of Coke, too.
Yeah.
Just sitting there, like life had just stopped.
It's those little details that really stick with you, like a snapshot of a moment frozen in time.
I know, right? And to add to that, in Suzanne's room, the TV was on.
Yeah.
But it's just showing static, that snow you get when there's no signal.
Oh, yeah.
It's like whatever happened, it happened suddenly. They didn't turn the TV off. They didn't finish their drinks. It was just over.
Okay, so Giannis gets to the house and finds all this. What does she do?
Giannis was, you can imagine, beside herself. She calls 911 right there from the house. But here's another piece of the puzzle, and this one is just heartbreaking. When she was checking the answering machine, she heard a message. She said it sounded strange, but in those days, those old answering machines, you had to press play to hear the message.
I remember those.
Yeah. And tragically, in the process of listening to it, she accidentally erased it. Gone.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The police later said they believe that message could have been a major clue, and it was lost just like that.
Ugh, that's just awful. A potential lead gone.
It's really tough to think about. And there's another thing that makes this case so difficult.
Mm.
It's the timeline and all the activity at the house after the women were last seen.
What do you mean?
Think about it. Janice didn't call the police until more than 16 hours after anyone had last seen the women. And in those hours, family members, friends, they were all coming and going from the house.
Oh, man. Not good for the investigation.
Not at all. The police figured that maybe 10 to 20 people had been inside before they secured the scene. Who knows what evidence was disturbed or lost?
That's a lot of potential contamination. So if we try to put it all together, the timeline investigators came up with was that the disappearance happened sometime between 2 a.m. when Suzanne and Stacy left the party and 8 a.m. on June 7th.
That's the window.
Okay, so that's the timeline. We've got the unlocked door, the belongings left behind, the strange broken porch light. Was there any sign of a fight or a struggle inside the house?
That's the thing. Apart from that porch light, the police really didn't find any clear signs of a struggle inside. Sherrill's bed, remember, it looked slept in. They did find one window blind that was bent weirdly, but overall, the house didn't look like the scene of a violent confrontation.
So no forced entry, no signs of a fight, 3 women vanished without a trace. This was a huge deal, right?
Absolutely. It was a case that immediately grabbed everyone's attention. It just didn't make sense. And within just 2 days, on June 9th, the FBI was called in to help with the investigation. They knew this was something big.
So the FBI gets involved. What do they start doing?
Well, one of the first things they did was start searching those remote areas around Springfield, wooded areas, places like that.
Makes sense, thinking maybe they were taken somewhere out of the way.
Right. Sadly, those searches turned up absolutely nothing. No trace of the women.
So, dead end after dead end. What about suspects? Did they have any leads early on?
They did, but most of them fizzled out pretty quickly. One of the early leads involved a report of a strange guy, described as a transient, who had been hanging around the neighborhood in the days leading up to the disappearances.
Okay, a suspicious character. Did they ever find him?
They tried, put out a description, asked around the whole 9 yards, but they never could identify him. So whether he had anything to do with it or not, we just don't know.
Another dead end. What about boyfriends or exes? Any of them look suspicious.
They looked at Suzanne's ex-boyfriend, a guy named Dustin Rekla, and he had a possible motive, too. See, Suzanne was supposed to testify against him in a vandalism and theft case that was coming up.
Oh, so he had a reason to want her out of the picture.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Rekla had a solid alibi for the night the women disappeared. People could vouch for where he was, so he was cleared as a suspect.
Okay, ex-boyfriend cleared. Anyone else close to them come up on the radar?
They even looked at Sherrill's son, Bart Streeter. Suzanne's brother.
Family drama.
Yeah, there were some reports of tension within the family. So naturally, the police wanted to rule him out.
And did they?
It seems so. Bart also had an alibi. His girlfriend at the time backed him up, said he was with her, and a neighbor confirmed it too. Plus, he agreed to take a polygraph test, and according to reports, he passed.
Polygraph, huh? Those aren't always foolproof, are they?
You're right. They're not admissible as evidence in court for a reason, but at the time, it was enough to take the heat off of him.
So the ex-boyfriend and the brother both cleared. What other leads were they chasing?
Well, there was one more that seemed promising at first. A witness came forward and said they saw Suzanne in a van early that morning, around 6:30 a.m.
In a van? What was she doing?
This witness said Suzanne looked really distressed, and there's a man in the back of the van yelling at her.
Oh, that's creepy. Did anyone else see this van?
Actually, yeah, a few other people reported seeing a van that matched the description in the area around the same time. It was all pretty vague, no license plate, no clear description of the guy.
Just enough to make you wonder, though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just a frustrating sliver of information that never led anywhere concrete. And then you have the name that always comes up when you talk about the Springfield Three. This is where things get really interesting and, a little disturbing.
Give it to me. Who are we talking about?
Robert Craig Cox.
Yeah.
And this guy, he's got a past.
What do you mean?
He already been convicted of murder in Florida, though that conviction was later overturned.
Overturned. What happened there?
Long story. Legal technicalities, I think. But it's not like that was his only brush with the law. He also pleaded guilty to kidnapping and assault in California. So, yeah, this guy had a history of serious violence.
Okay, that's not great. So, what's his connection to the Springfield Three?
Well, after that murder conviction was overturned, guess where he moved?
Springfield.
Bingo. So now he's in the same town as Sherrill, Suzanne, and Stacy. And it gets even creepier.
How so?
Cox actually knew Stacy, Well, through her dad, at least. They both worked at the same car lot.
Oh, wow. So this wasn't just some random guy.
Nope. This was someone who was right there in their circle. And naturally, the investigators zeroed in on him.
Did they have anything concrete to tie him to the disappearances?
At first, his girlfriend gave him an alibi for the time when the women likely disappeared.
Okay, so that clears him, right?
Not so fast.
Yeah.
The girlfriend later changed her story. She told the police that Cox had asked her to lie for him.
Oh, that's suspicious, to say the least.
Right. It throws a whole new light on things. And then, in 1996, while Cox was locked up in Texas for robbery, he says something that really sets off alarm bells. He tells a reporter that he knows the Springfield Three are dead and that they're buried somewhere in Springfield.
Hold on, he just came out and said that.
Yeah, but he never actually admitted to being involved in their disappearance. It was this vague, unsettling claim, like he was, I don't know, taunting everyone.
That's chilling. So they had this guy, history of violence, connection to the victims, making cryptic claims. They must have charged him, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But despite all of that, they never officially charged him in connection with the Springfield Three. To this day, it's a mystery.
Wow. So where is he now?
He's currently serving a life sentence in Texas for that robbery. But get this, he's eligible for parole in 2025. And there's this other thing he said. He claimed he'd reveal what he knows about the Springfield Three after his mother died.
Did she?
She did, but so far, Cox hasn't said anything.
It's like he's playing a game with everyone. So besides Cox, were there any other big developments in the case?
Yeah, actually, there was one in December of '92 that almost broke the case wide open. It involved that TV show, America's Most Wanted.
Oh, yeah, I remember that show. They helped solve a ton of cases.
Right. Well, they got an anonymous call on their tip line. Someone with what the police called prime knowledge about the Springfield Three.
Prime knowledge? What does that even mean?
Exactly. We don't know. It could have been anything. They witnessed something. They overheard someone talking. We just don't know.
So they had someone on the line who potentially knew what happened. Then what?
The worst possible thing. While the operator was trying to connect the caller to the investigators in Springfield, the call dropped. Disconnected.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. And they pleaded publicly for the caller to call back, but they never did.
Man, that's gotta be one of the most frustrating things I've ever heard. So close, and then nothing.
I know. It's agonizing to think that a crucial piece of information was just lost like that. And then, 5 years after the women disappeared, in 1997, there was another development, a legal one this time. Sherrill and Suzanne were declared legally dead.
Oh, wow. So even with no bodies, no proof, they were gone.
Legally, yes. But officially, the case is still classified as missing. It shows you just how strange this whole thing is, right? Even after all this time, no one knows for sure what happened.
You mentioned earlier that there were over 5,000 tips in this case. Any of them ever lead anywhere?
Most were dead ends, unfortunately. But there was one in the early 2000s that, well, it certainly got people talking. This tip claimed that the women's bodies were buried under a parking garage.
Under a parking garage? That's a bit specific, isn't it?
It was. Specifically, the tip said they were buried in the foundation of the south parking garage at Cox Hospital in Springfield.
Cox Hospital? Any connection to Robert Cox?
No, just a weird coincidence.
No.
But that tip, it was enough to get them to do a ground-penetrating radar scan of the parking garage in 2007. And they found something.
They did? What was it?
3 anomalies underground. They said they were roughly the size and shape of graves.
Oh, wow. So they were right.
Not so fast. The police decided not to dig. They said the tip wasn't credible enough.
Why not, if they found something on the radar?
There were a few problems. First, that parking garage. It was built in 1993.
After the women disappeared.
Exactly. And the person who gave the tip, they couldn't explain how the bodies would have gotten there or why they'd be buried under a parking garage that wasn't even built yet.
That does make it sound a little less believable.
Right. Plus, think about the logistics. Digging up a parking garage. It's a huge undertaking. And they didn't have enough evidence to justify it.
I guess that makes sense. So even with all these tips, the searches, the investigation, they never came up with a definitive answer about what happened.
Nope. And that's what keeps people coming back to this case. There are all these theories, but nothing concrete.
What kind of theories are we talking about?
Well, as you might imagine, Robert Cox's name comes up a lot. With his history, his connection to Stacy, and those cryptic statements, it's hard not to see him as a strong suspect.
I guess that's understandable, but they could never prove anything.
Nope. Then there's this other theory, not as popular, but it's out there. The idea that maybe Sherrill was the target and Suzanne and Stacy were just tragically in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Because they decided to stay at her house that night.
Right. But there's not much to go on with that theory. We don't know much about Sherrill's personal life, whether she had any enemies or anything like that.
It's all speculation at this point. What about those guys who were cleared early on? Susie's ex and her brother.
Yeah, you'll still find people online who think they might be involved, especially Dustin Rockla. The motive with the vandalism case, it just sticks with people.
But they both had alibis, right?
As far as the investigators are concerned, yes. But some people remain skeptical, especially about Bart Streeter's alibi. You know that online piece you found?
Yeah.
It mentions how polygraphs aren't perfect and how the neighbor who backed up his alibi, well, they were pretty far away, couldn't really see what was going on.
So there's still that lingering doubt, even though the police don't consider him a suspect. It's amazing how these details get stuck in people's minds, even after all this time.
I know, right? It shows you the power of a mystery like this. It just grabs hold of you.
It's incredible, really. We've covered a lot of ground here, a lot of twists and turns. So, to be clear, this case is still unsolved, right?
Yep. Officially, it remains an open investigation, and there's still a pretty hefty reward out there for information. $43,000 to be exact.
$43,000? Wow, that's a lot of money. So what kind of information are they looking for?
Anything that leads to the location of the women, or to the arrest and conviction of the person or people responsible. They've even released detailed descriptions of what the women looked like back in 1992.
What were they like?
Sherrill was about 5 feet tall, weighed around 110 pounds, had brown eyes and short bleached blonde hair, kind of curly. Stacy was a bit taller, 5'3", about 120 pounds. She had those striking blue eyes, and her hair was dark blonde, medium length. Oh, and she had freckles and a dimple on her chin.
Okay. What about Suzanne?
Suzanne was 5'2", weighed about 102 pounds, and also had brown eyes. Her hair was straight, bleached blonde, and shoulder length. She also had a noticeable scar on her right forearm and a small tumor near her mouth. It was benign, though.
Man, it's like I can almost picture them. It's hard to believe that they just vanished.
I know. It really is. And it's impossible to talk about this case without mentioning Stacy's mom, Janice. She has been absolutely incredible.
What do you mean?
Even though Sherrill and Suzanne were declared dead, Janice has never given up hope. She's dedicated her life to finding her daughter and to helping other families of missing persons. She even co-founded a nonprofit to support those families. She's truly an inspiration.
That's powerful. So even though the case is unsolved, there's a way for people to remember these women, right?
Absolutely. There's a bench dedicated to them in the Victims' Memorial Garden in Springfield. It's a beautiful, peaceful spot.
A place where people can go to remember and reflect.
Exactly. And this case, it's gotten so much attention over the years. I mean, you've got those big shows like 48 Hours, America's Most Wanted, Disappeared, even People Magazine Investigates has covered it.
It's one of those cases that just captures the imagination, right?
I think so. And there's even a podcast dedicated to the case called the Springfield Three, a small town disappearance.
So even now, decades later, people are still digging for answers.
It shows you just how much this case resonates with people, how much they want justice for these women.
Well, after digging into all this with you, I can definitely see why. It's almost unbelievable that something like this could happen. 3 people gone, just like that.
I know. It's one of those cases that really sticks with you. And that's what's so frustrating, right? No clear motive, no solid evidence, no explanation for how 3 people could just vanish.
Leaving all their stuff behind. It's just, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And it all comes back to those big questions. How did this happen? Why did it happen? What was the meaning of that broken porch light? Could that lost message on the answering machine have held the key to solving it all? We just don't know.
And it makes you think about the families, too. The pain they must still be going through, not knowing what happened to their loved ones.
It's impossible to imagine, really.
Yeah.
And the community, too. There's got to be this lingering sense of unease, knowing that something like this could happen in their town.
It just underscores how fragile things can be, how quickly life can change.
That's for sure. And as we wrap this up, here's something I want you all to think about. Remember how Suzanne and Stacy weren't even planning on staying at Sherrill's house that night?
Yeah, they only went there because their friend's house was too crowded.
Right. So what if that changed everything? What if they were the wrong targets? What if whoever was behind this was really after Sherrill and Suzanne and Stacy were just caught in the crossfire?
Man, that's a heavy thought.
It is. It makes you wonder, was this whole thing planned? Or was it just A horrible, random act of violence. That one little detail, that change of plans, could have been the difference between life and death.
It's a chilling thought, and one that really gets to the heart of this whole tragedy. The wrong place at the wrong time. It's a terrifying concept.
It is. And it's something that, sadly, we see play out in so many of these cases. But in the case of the Springfield Three, it just adds another layer of mystery to an already baffling and heartbreaking story.
Well said.
Thanks.
To all our listeners out there, if you have any information about this case, no matter how small or insignificant you think it might be, please reach out to the authorities. You can find their contact information on our website.
Every little bit helps.
You never know, that one piece of information could be the key to finally bringing closure to this case. And to the families of Sherrill, Suzanne, and Stacy, we haven't forgotten about you. We're still searching for answers.